And it's barrier, and it's on a delay. What's going on? What's going on? And hi everyone, and welcome on back to the channel. Today we have the Revenant Scepter to talk about, and I'm gonna be honest, this one was a little interesting. She's interesting. There are some things that I enjoy about the direction of this weapon, and some things that I am a little bit more concerned about in terms of the way that it's built. But we're gonna get into all of that right now. This blog post was written and revealed to us under the title of Create Otherworldly Bonds When Revenants Brandish Scepters. And this was created by Chung Hong Fung, a game designer on the systems team at ArenaNet. And because it is a scepter, there's only 3 abilities, even though there might be some flipovers here. And they revealed all of them today, along with a trailer. It reads, "Don't cross the streams. Revenants wield scepters in an unorthodox way that is unique for their profession. Having observed the Cryptus in battle, they draw upon their ability to connect individuals together using the scepter as a conduit. They use this conduit to channel energies between targets, strengthening allies and debilitating enemies. The Revenant's auto attack chain projects a concentrated stream of energy from the tip of the scepter, which they wield like a blade to swing in a wide arc, damaging multiple enemies. The first attack, Serene Strike, is a simple melee slice, while the follow-up attack, Acribic Cut, will grant might to allies, and Motivating Whirl is the third strike of the auto attack chain, which cleaves enemies in a 360-degree radius around the Revenant and applies barrier to allies on impact. The second skill, Blossoming Aura, infuses an enemy target with energy from the mists, dealing damage over time. After a delay, this energy explodes outward, damaging the enemy and granting barrier to allies. This effect can be strengthened by repeatedly striking the enemy with auto attacks, causing the final explosion to deal more damage and grant additional barrier to allies. While this skill can be cast at range, if you want to maximize the second effect, you'll need to get in your enemy's face. So before we move on to the third ability, there is a lot to talk about already from the first 2 abilities shown. Well, the auto attack chain and the second ability. First and foremost, this is a melee weapon, which, not gonna lie, don't love. And the fact that it's a sword, it's yet another sword for Revenant. And when you have a class as magical as a martial class, such as the Revenant, I thought it was a great opportunity for them to deal with something more raw in terms of mist energy. And yes, it is being conjured in the form of a sword, but something more castery. I mean, even staff isn't a ranged weapon. The only ranged weapon we really have, at least for the core profession, is hammer, and of course short bow, which was later introduced. But we've really been missing that sense of ranged combat, and especially ranged support. So I thought this was going to be a great opportunity for them to do that, but it's not really the case. And while you might be able to apply some of these effects at ranged, you're not really going to capitalize on the most efficient playstyle if you are just at ranged. You have to get into melee. And so the auto attack is this concentrated sword, and what we saw in the visuals on the trailer, which we'll get into in a moment, I gotta admit, it is a little stiff, it is a little rigid. Now, some people have been requesting it to be more like a whip, and I think that would have actually visually read a lot better if it was a bit more flexible rather than just a sword. And the fact, I have some questions about this, because the auto attack, you're only getting that barrier on the final hit, it seems, which does not make this a super reliable in terms, well, if you're in a situation where you need to grant that support and especially that barrier to your allies, you have to be completing your auto attack chains. And how much barrier are we getting? And the fact that it is barrier means that it's even harder and more difficult, because barrier is something you want to build up in preparation for an attack. But when you have so much time of a gap to get to that barrier, doesn't make it as useful. If it was healing, I don't think I would have as much of a problem, but because it's barrier, I don't know, Barrier, in my opinion, needs to be more on demand, kind of like Scepter, Spectre. It should have an ally target effect too, that you can cycle through this auto attack chain in those events where you are trying to just build up the barrier. I don't know, I'm a little iffy. But they also revealed the second ability called Blossoming Aura, which is an ability where you can cast it at range, but you want to capitalize off of this by damaging that target, because it will build up the strength of that skill even more, which I actually really love from a design perspective. But when you're actually needing to be in melee for it, why even make it a ranged ability anyways? And the fact that, once again, you need an enemy target to capitalize off of that support, off of that barrier, which also is probably on a delay. And it doesn't seem like you can cast this on an ally to then have it roll on them to explode. Now, if you could ally target someone, place the rift on them, maybe heal them up, and the more they get healed or the more barrier they get, they actually strengthen that explosion. That would be interesting, but it doesn't seem like that's how that works. So from a support perspective, so far the auto attack is a little iffy, and the second ability is also a little iffy because it is delayed and because it is barrier. I'm not sure. I mean, it might not really matter, but I'm just thinking about in those tighter timed scenarios, like in competitive, perhaps, even in some PvE encounters, you really need to apply those shields and those barriers so that your enemies don't die. If they are super low, but you're not really going to be able to save them in that way. Now let's get into the final ability, because this is a lot of info. It is Otherworldly Bond. It's an upkeep skill that creates a spiritual tether between you and your target. The tether has differing effects based on whether the target is an ally or an enemy. When used on an ally, the tether continually grants might to the target and allies around you. When an enemy is being tethered, the target will instead be inflicted with vulnerability and take additional strike damage from the Revenant. The tether can be manually broken with the accompanying follow-up skill Deactivate, and it will automatically break if the Revenant moves too far away from the target. And like Blossoming Aura, attacking enemies will cause the effects of the tether to strengthen. There's a lot of this. We're gonna get into it, but that is not all for that ability. When the tether reaches maximum strength, the Revenant gains a new follow-up skill called Otherworldly Attraction. The allied version allows the Revenant to shadow step to the tethered target, granting barrier to allies around them, and when an enemy is targeted, it instead pulls the tethered target toward the Revenant while applying additional vulnerability to them. So there is a lot of this. You only support allies if you are successfully striking enemies. So you are like a battle support, but it's in the form of barrier instead of healing. I think healing would make more sense for this. But then again, you already have that on staff. And the fact that this is an upkeep skill, and it's the only ally target ability on this weapon set, and it's the only way that you'd get that support if you target an ally. Yeah, Mama, I'm just going to say it's a little... And the fact that it's melee, but this is going to be ranged, and if you happen to target an ally, if you want to get their support, you can't really control that ally. So if they start moving out of range and you teleport to them, yes, you're going to get that barrier. How large of a radius? But then you're going to be out of positioning. How are you going to get back in? I like some of the concepts. Spiritual tethers, opening rifts that explode. You know, you empower those rifts by dealing damage to them or to that target. If it was an ally effect, if you healed them or you applied barrier, any overhealing or barrier that is applied to that would, you know, strengthen it. There are concepts here which I like. It being a melee scepter, don't love that. Don't love that. The fact that it's barrier, but almost all the barrier is not on demand, don't love that. And the fact that when you're tethered to that ally, it only is pulsing might? That's a little weak. It's an upkeep skill on a weapon? Listen, I love that it's a support weapon. I love that we're getting a main hand support weapon for Revenant. And I think you should be able to be good with this. But purely from a description standpoint and all the information, because they did give us a lot of information, which I love. I don't know. It feels like a little too much. It feels like a little too much and illogically placed with terms of timing, the functionality of that support. You're granting might. Are you granting any other boons like regen? Regen would be a nice supplement. Actually talk about the visuals for this weapon on the scepter. And I gotta admit, I kind of like it. I do like some of the things that we're seeing here. Granted, the auto attack does look stiff. She's looking a little stiff. She needs to get relaxed a little bit. I also find it interesting that they show off a shield skill to kind of get the enemy onto you. But it's sword, which is also one thing that I don't like from a visual perspective. It's just giving me sword, and we already have sword on Revenant. It doesn't really feel new. It doesn't really feel like, this is the way the Revenant differentiates its weapon sets and creates a unique variety of gameplay. And that's really disappointing. It is honestly gutting, just from like a visual perspective and, you know, class fantasy. It's like, okay, well, they can't really think of much else. They're just going to bring it to melee. You know, what does Revenant do best? Then bring it to melee. But I like the visual that we get for the rift and the explosion. I think that is actually really beautiful. I kind of wouldn't mind if these were just like, if that second ability, Blossoming Aura, was just a ground targeted, like after 1 or 1.5 seconds it explodes. Honestly, that big mist sword would have been better on Greatsword as a visual, I think. Or main hand sword, offhand sword, I don't know. But I like the trailer. The visual component is something that I do enjoy. I do have a lot of other concerns and or just bewilderments around the other, you know, the structure of this weapon. But yeah, that was Revenant Scepter. How are you enjoying this? Did you like what they shared? Do you like this weapon? Because I actually showed you everything that this weapon offers. I like that there's like some lore attached to this. That's kind of fun. That's exciting. That's new. But yeah, do you like the trailer? How are you feeling about the skills? Delayed barrier. Do you think there should be more ally target abilities to kind of help flesh that out? Post anything that you feel in the comments below. This one in particular, I kind of want to like talk to y'all about it because maybe some of you like it. Maybe y'all can show me the ways in the comments. But thank you all so much for coming on by. Comment, share, and subscribe for more Guild Wars 2 content and other MMOs. And I will see you all in the next one.
Everyone.